You are listening to a panel conversation recorded live on Tuesday, the 25th of November, 2025, following the performance of Punch at the Apollo Theatre, Shaftesbury Avenue. The conversation is part of the After the Punch series, curated by the Forgiveness Project. The speakers are Jacob Dunne, Alastair Campbell, Dawnay, and Sean Fletcher.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is that working? Thank you very much for joining us for this post-show discussion. We've got a great panel here. Just to fill you in, we'll be talking about some of the issues that were raised in Punch, which you've just seen, but also moving on to the national conversation emerging from it. So this is titled Justice Beyond the Headlines, Bridging Divides to Find Common Ground on Justice. This discussion is presented in partnership with the Common Ground Justice Project, which we're going to hear a lot more about in this discussion, an initiative working across communities, politics and public life to identify the shared priorities that unite people on justice. I'm Sean Fletcher, I'm a broadcaster on the BBC and ITV. You may have seen me on Countryfile and Good Morning Britain, but it's Sunday Morning Live, the BBC programme, that introduced me to restorative justice. So we were having a panel discussion about prisons, and that's when I met Jacob. He came on the show, and I just thought, why have I not heard of restorative justice before? I mean, this was about a year ago, so I'm quite a late comer to this, but that's why I'm here, and we're going to now have a discussion for about 20 minutes. And then 10 minutes, we're going to put it out to the floor. So I think there are some roving mics out there. So think of your questions and we'll come to you very soon. Let me introduce you to the panel. So I've got Jacob Dunne to my right. Now, he is the star of the show, but in real life. He wrote a book, Right from Wrong, based on his experiences, and then that was adapted into the play Punch. So that's why he's here. We've got round of applause. So he's, of course, an author, but he's also co-founder of Common Ground Justice Project. Alice Dawnay is a founder of Switchback charity and now co-founder of Common Ground Justice Project. You've got some fans out there, I think. And finally, you'll recognise him. It's Alastair Campbell, the former Labour strategist, now writer and broadcaster on The Rest is Politics. Let's give him a round of applause as well. Whoop, whoop. So for me, I was just shocked that it took me so long to learn about restorative justice, but I'm here and it's better late than never. Alastair, why are you here? Just tell us the story of how you became to be sitting on the stage.
Well, I went to see this amazing play at the Young Vic. James Graham, the brilliant playwright, is a friend of mine, and he said, "You come and see my new play." So Fiona and I went along and thought it was brilliant. Cried a couple of times, no more than that. And on the way out, this young guy shouted at me, Alastair. And it happens a lot. And I'm always a bit wary. And he goes, "It's Jacob." And he goes, the real Jacob. And it was him. And this guy, I tell you, he's a brilliant campaigner. He loves this issue so much. Now, I did know about restorative justice, but I've always been very, very frustrated that we just haven't shifted the criminal justice system. And I think why this play is just so brilliant is it touches on so many parts of our life that we know aren't working, that we know we have to change, and we just don't change them. Prisons, probation, and I think the concept of restorative justice and the story, the way it's told, and each time it gets you. So that's why I'm here. I'm here because he told me to be.
I mean, is that how it was for you, Jacob? You hounded him?
Yeah, I ran him down the street. He tried to get away, but I was quicker than him, and then that was the end of it.
Yeah, he's a lot of things, but he's not very fast. So I've seen him run. I don't know. It's all arms and legs. So let's just get into Punch then. So Punch, Jacob, is it's finding common ground. It's about finding common ground. It's difficult to find, but you find it. What you're trying to do with the Common Ground Justice Project is to find common ground, but in the whole justice system, the broader justice system. Can you just explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to describe it is Act 1 of Punch. All the characters, the main characters, David and Joan, the victims, me, Jacob, the perpetrator, are all stuck. And they're all frustrated and angry for their own reasons, and they can't find a way forward, and it builds up resentment and it builds up anger. And that is how the country is at the moment. You know, that's a state of politics. People don't feel heard, people don't feel listened to, people feel powerless. There was a poll that came out recently that 54% of the country feels powerless and feels like they've got no agency, rising for other political parties. And we need to try and help people become unstuck. And I believe that the way that we help people become unstuck, the way that we help people feel like they've got more agency, the way that we help people try and feel like more hopeful about the future is by making them feel listened to, making them feel like people are listening. And if you look at the micro example of this play, it's those characters, individuals stuck. Us thinking, how can we get justice? That's a big question. What does justice look like? Is justice someone suffering for what they've done, but continuing to reoffend? Or is it maybe that people don't create more victims and take responsibility and are accountable with less harsh a punishment? We've got to try and work this stuff out, because at the moment our national debate is stuck. It's so polarized on crime and justice. And what helped me and David and Joan, who are now advisors to the Common Ground Justice Project, what helped us unlock, what helped us move forward, what helped us heal, was being able to listen to each other, was being able to co-create solutions and get our needs met. And I didn't know what my needs were. At the end of Act 1, the most important question was, Jacob, what are you going to do with your life? The people who I'd harmed the most in the world took an interest in me, made me want to care about myself, made me think, you know what, if they can care about me, then I should care about me. And it unlocked something for us. And then in Act 2, you all see how that transforms lives. And what we want to do is take that restorative approach to the national debate on justice to find out once and for all what the public really want, where the common ground is. And I hope that many of you will be able to support us in that journey and in that quest, because we have not been able to reform the justice system. It is stuck. We know what works, but we don't create the policies to create the change, to reduce reoffending, to keep our streets safer, to support victims. It's a lose-lose at the moment, because I believe politicians are scared of what the public think. So what we want to do is find out for sure what the public think and where the common ground is, so that we can be bolder and solve and reform our justice system.
I'll ask you in a bit more detail, to give a bit more detail on that in just a moment. But Alice, you've worked in and around the prison system for many years, haven't you? What led you to set up the Common Ground Justice Project?
Yeah, I have a different kind of insider understanding of the justice system from Jacob. But I've been a prisons inspector, I have run justice charities, and I set up Switchback and ran it for 15 years. And Switchback's an organisation that works with young adult men, kind of men a bit like Jacob when he was a teenager, who are coming out of prison. And we support young men to build a different future for themselves on the outside and get into work. And through that work, I got to see just how broken the system is, and to see how the justice charities are really kind of the glue that is holding things together in this broken system. It's operating in the cracks of where it's broken. And are extraordinary charities doing really, really amazing work in that space, and they know what works. Our reoffending rate at Switchback was 9% compared to a national average for young offenders of something that's tipping more like 50, 60%. we know what works, and these justice charities are very often writing reports and producing evidence and trying to change the system, and something is blocking it. And these are getting stuck, and these reports are gathering dust, and they're landing on the desks of politicians and policymakers, and it's not cutting through. And we were asking ourselves, why is it not cutting through? What is it that's getting in the way? And there's something that's well known, I think, in the civil service, and which is it's not going to pass the Daily Mail test. We've got a lovely, innovative idea. It's doing good stuff. We can see that it works, but we can't get a headline on this. This isn't going to look like tough on crime, and therefore we can't put it through. And this is where we want to actually go out and talk to the general public, and actually speak to voters, because we think that voters are who politicians are going to listen to, if anyone. Speak to voters, speak to victims, speak to communities that do not feel heard, and actually ask them, what do you want? Are your views represented by clickbait, by headlines, or in fact, are we asking the wrong questions when we're thinking about bold policy?
Yeah, I mean, Alastair, you've obviously been at the heart of government, but you're also in media. Is it fair that is media influencing things in a way that, you know, when we talk about the Daily Mail test, passing the Daily Mail test, that is it shaping government?
I haven't. Paul Dacre, who ran the Daily Mail when I was in my pomp, I think I last spoke to him in 2001 when I decided that the Daily Mail was the worst of British life, posing as the best. The point I make to politicians is, don't worry about the media, because the media landscape is just completely transformed now. The media is people on their phones. And the reason why I think this is such an exciting project is because I think when you do get out and allow people to have a debate that goes beyond headlines, goes beyond caricature, goes beyond tough on crime, weak on crime, then I think the public are much more nuanced about this. They know prisons are a disaster. And yes, you still get people who lock them up, throw away the key, you shouldn't have done it in the first place, don't give a damn. But when they see that one of the first things the new Labour government had to do was to release people early from prisons, because the prisons are at breaking point. When they see, you've got today, David Lammy announcing that there may actually be a reduction in jury trials in some areas just to try to get the system moving. You know, I think the public are much more nuanced. And when the reason why plays like this are so important, and stories like this are so important, I've got to know Jacob pretty well. And by the way, he and James Graham are the guest on our podcast this week. And the guy who edits it said it's in his mind the best that we've done, because you got somebody like Jacob who's, people love stories of redemption, and you know, I just think we've got to stop worrying about what a very narrow-minded section of the community thinks, and start thinking about what do we think, and what do people think, and what can we allow people to do to make the best of themselves. Some prison systems do it. Go to Norway and see how they treat prisoners. You know, we've got to move on and change. And sorry, excuse my French, F-U-C-K the Mail. But
just to say, I mean, when you were in government, what was it? Tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. Prison numbers went up. I mean, they have under all governments. But I mean, did you feel it's easier now to talk about it? But when you're in government, actually, you did have to do all that stuff.
Possibly. Of course, it's easier when you're out, and you know, I think being in government right now is really hard. You know, it really is. But we talked about this. I talked about this with Jacob. Tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. The two go together. Now, tough on crime is basically saying where, you know, there are people who, frankly, are constantly a danger to society. You have to be tough on them. But tough on the causes of crime is just as important. I would argue now much more important. So I just think we're looking at this stuff through the wrong lens. And you're right that people sit around saying, well, what will the papers say? Honestly, I reached a point long before I left of thinking, that is not the prism through which we've got to look. What is the right thing to do? What are the right systems to bring in place? So
Jacob, I mean, so the programme that we met on Sunday Morning Live, we often have panel discussions. And when we have a prison panel discussion, it's always, there's just a chasm between the two sides. So you've got some people on one side, lock them up, throw away the key. You've got other people saying, well, they need therapy and they need help. And I mean, I'm sitting there hosting a panel discussion, shorter than this, 12 minutes, and I'm just thinking we never come to an agreement. You're talking about finding common ground. How on earth do you do that? And why, how would you go about starting to, bridge that chasm?
Well, we've got lots of strategies to do this: polling, focus grouping, creative listening exercises, going out in the public with a social media strategy, engaging the public through our comms, and then events. So we attended. We're a tiny little charity, three of us. Shout out Sam, our other co-founder somewhere, and go on, Sam. And we're all part-time, but what we've managed to achieve in that time is pretty much remarkable. We've done all the party conferences, just to give you an idea of some emerging common ground. We went at the Reform Party conference, where we actually got some backlash for attending the Reform Party conference from our own, well, not saying my own, but from the criminal justice sector and progressive liberals, you might want to call them, who were like, how can you go into that and engaging with that party? But my stance is, like me and David and Joan, I can't judge anybody. I have to wake up every day knowing that I've killed somebody. And I've met many people in prison that have killed people, and I've seen the worst and the best of people on the whole spectrum, and I can't judge someone because of the way they vote. You know what I mean? Or they have legitimate concerns. They have freedom of speech. They can, as long as they're not inciting violence, it's free to them. But to finish the point, what causes crime was one of the questions we asked Reform Party members: personal circumstances or personal choice? And we gave them the option of both. 64% of Reform Party members said it's a blend of both. And then we asked them, what should be the priority for the justice system? Rehabilitation or punishment, or both? 78% of Reform Party members said it should be a blend of both rehabilitation and punishment. And that's going beyond the headline debate that we have. Engaging with people, going to party conferences, polling, gathering the evidence, and using as many creative methods of listening to people and meeting them where they're at. Whether that's the most people who are victims of crime, different swing seats around the country. But we can't do all of that with just three of us on a part-time wage. But what we have been able to do is we've created a report that you can all see on our website, Course Correction, with our emerging principles, what we want to dig deeper and really understand where that common ground is.
Alice, is it, because Jacob's talking about finding common ground, so that seems like listening to lots of people, but is there a worry that if you listen to the public too much, you might get the wrong result? Are you educating people as well? Where's the balance here? Because the danger is if you put stuff out to the public. I mean, Alastair, you talk about this quite a lot.
Yeah, they might give you the wrong answer.
They'll give you the wrong with something you don't want. Where does that balance come with education?
We are very deliberately not asking these questions with our own views. We are really trying to go to where the public are at and asking and respecting that. And it is that the public want to see punishment. That is something that the public want to see.
I mean, just to interrupt, I mean, I'm sure I saw a poll a few years ago, and that if you ask people whether they wanted the death penalty or not, more people want the death penalty than not. I feel like I've read that somewhere. I mean, that's the worry, isn't it? That you get a lot of punishment and not much rehabilitation if you ask the public.
Yeah, the public do want to see punishment, but I think what is part of the problem is that the justice charities have been so squeamish about asking the question and kind of reaching out and listening that there is, this divide that we see in all sorts of areas in the country, and this very polarised debate just turns into a tug of war that goes nowhere and is just completely stuck. And actually, if you ask people what they want, they will say punishment. If you ask them a very quick, short question, they will give you a quick, short answer. If you give them 30 seconds instead of 3 seconds to answer the question, you'll hear I want to see, we asked a man in South Bolton, which is an area that is Labour to Reform switching. We had a focus group there. There was a man in South Bolton who said, I want to see really harsh punishment. And for people that are addicted to drugs, I want to see them supported to manage to come off their addiction. And it's much more nuanced if you literally give a few extra seconds. If you give 3 minutes to somebody, they will actually explain where they're coming from, where these beliefs, and they're very legitimate hopes and fears. But there is a real understanding of what's behind what people want.
I mean, it's clear when you look at reoffending rates. I mean, the reoffending rates for short sentences is about 65%. I mean, it's really high if you think about it. It clearly isn't working. But when you try and bring in anything new, I guess, in government, I'll ask you this in a minute, Alastair, but just firstly to Jacob, surely you need a vision and a focus and a leader who's strong, who's going to take it on, not asking everybody where you might get something that's a bit wishy-washy. I mean, if you were reforming the NHS, you would have a vision, wouldn't you? Why is justice different? Why are you asking for everybody's opinion when it comes to justice?
I think because, our theory of change on justice is that the government and policymakers are scared of public perception. So there isn't that bold leadership to drive policy change. So that's why we want to go, okay, we've got to do it the opposite way around when it comes to justice policy. When it comes to the NHS, a doctor doesn't diagnose an issue and then go, I'm going to prescribe you public perception. Like they treat it with an evidence-based prescription. And that's what we should be doing in justice and taking a more rational approach, like what Alice achieved at Switchback, 9% reoffending rates. That logically should be kind of rolled out to the best of the government's resources, and whatever other constraints would prevent that from being rolled out more.
I mean, I think the thing, look, government's resources are always an issue, but I think that your point, Sean, about vision, about setting out what sort of criminal justice system as a whole do we want. And I really do think that what they're doing, they're not bringing forward all the proposals to reform the criminal justice system. They're finding out, I guess, the limits of what you think the public might take. And I think that's a really sensible thing to do. And I think that should inform government policy. And I'm very, very confident. I mean, I go around the country the whole time, I talk to loads of people. I'm very, very confident that if this debate is led from government, including government, and is led and basically starts from the premise the current system is broken. That is why we did have to empty the prisons. That's why we are having to think about, non-jury trials. That's why we are looking at reform of the probation system, etc. And the vision, to my mind, should be these twin approaches. The public have to feel safe. The public have to feel that people who are a real danger to them and who have committed crimes are out of public circulation for a while, but whilst they're there has got to be a genuine attempt to rehabilitate them. And I go into prisons, not as much as Alice does, but I go into prisons, and honestly, I can't remember the last time I was in a prison and actually felt when I left. I go into school, every time I come out of school, I feel buzzing because I think kids are being taught stuff and there's hope and what have you. Even with all the politics going on, I can't remember the last time I came out of a prison without feeling, that is just not working. So if it's not working, you've got to change it. And that's the vision. We've got to have a reformed criminal justice system from top to bottom.
Yeah. We've got a couple of minutes with us, and then we're going to get some questions from you. So just think of your questions. Finally from you, from this section, Jacob, what are the next steps? Is there a sort of call to arms? You've got the audience there in the palm of your hand. What are you saying to them?
And by the way, Jacob, some of them have got a lot of money.
Well, the one thing that we are confident there is common ground on, this panel discussion has been beyond the headlines. And I was a headline. You can go out there and you can look at the newspaper reports on the Daily Mail that say murderer, killer, thug should be kept in prison. And I've disproven that and written my own narrative. And we want to know our goal is to find out what the public wants. And we're confident our first policy that we have actually developed because we were confident about it, and I had a play that I could use the press comms on the back of, was to make restorative justice a legal right for all victims. And I think that there is common ground that all victims of crime, even if you think that prisoners should be punished really badly, but they're going to come out and cause more victims. We need to prevent as many victims as possible. I've met many mothers out there across the country who have lost their sons. I've got too many mothers in my phone book who've lost their sons or daughters or have been, abused. I don't want that. I want to prevent that. And we need to give victims, we need to put victims at the heart of our justice system and make sure that they have all the rights available to them and all the support available to them. That's where the common ground is. I don't think there's anybody in this room or in the public really that would argue against victims' rights. And look what it did for us, to give a voice to victims, to make them ask questions, to listen to them, to make them get justice for themselves instead of the justice system handing out justice and distributing justice to people. And so only 1 in 20 victims of crime can recall being offered restorative justice. So we've got a campaign called righttobeheard.org, and we'd like you to sign a petition because restorative justice works. It reduces reoffending by up to 27%. It saves the taxpayer £14 for every £1 spent. And 8 in 10 victims that take part would recommend it to another person. So it works on all levels, the economy, reducing reoffending, and supporting victims to heal. So it's a no-brainer, and this is our first attempt at changing policy, finding common ground, and we'd love for you to join us. And any of you that can support us in terms of backing us beyond the petition, please help us work over the next 3 years to envision and work out where those boundaries are that you mentioned, Alastair, so we can move beyond this noisy debate and actually get things done.
I've overrun on us, so we've got a short time for questions. Hands up for any... Right, can we get a microphone to the one in the middle there? I don't know whether to pass it all the way along.
Or shout.
I think. Okay, so for our first question, perhaps you could just say your name and if you've got any involvement in prisons and then the question, or if not, just your name.
So my name's Ben Sturge. For full disclosure, I'm an ex-offender myself. I'm here with my partner Hannah today. We run a community interest company in the Bedfordshire area. We contract for the police, the prison, the probation service. Last year, we went over to Norway to meet with the Chief of Justice, where, frustratingly, we heard that the good practice that makes them successful in the lowest reoffending rates in the world were actually learnt from the UK. And we lost those many years ago. And restorative justice was a big mention in the time that we was there. Mention that there's just 3 of you involved in the charity at the moment. We'd definitely be open to collaborating or supporting you on the journey. If I could get round these people, Jacob, I'd hug you.
Well done.
That's great. I mean, as it wasn't a question and we're out of time, we're almost out of time. Are there other questions? Hands up. So we've got a lady in the front here, and we've got 2. Just shout it out, yeah. Maybe if you, because I don't think the people at the top can hear.
I'll repeat it. I'll repeat it. Yeah, go on.
Get it quickly.
Have you managed to forgive yourself? Is that possible? Is that a necessary step so that you are able to move forward and not sink back into toxic, self-destructive cycles that can perpetuate negative cycles?
You obviously haven't listened to our podcast because I asked him that question on the podcast.
Alastair, can you answer it for me, please?
Repeat the question for people at the top.
The question was whether Jacob's found the time being able to forgive himself.
And the answer to that is no. But there's a threshold, as I said on the Restless Politics podcast. Go and have a listen. Because I can feel really shameful. And there's this distinction to be made between shame and guilt. Shame is I am a bad person. Guilt is I did a bad thing. And detaching the self from the action. And that's what I'm always trying to tell people in prison is you can't you can't, because they all hate themselves deep down. They all feel shameful. And I'm like, you are more than the worst thing you've ever done. And I have to remind myself, I am more than the worst thing I've ever done. But sometimes I wake up and I think, it's unbearable. Or when I'm speaking to Joan or David and, we're on this stage together, and then I'm like, do I deserve to be forgiven? But I know that I can't be a good dad. I know that I can't get up in the morning. I'll fall in depression. So there's that threshold where I need to feel an element of shame to keep me motivated and to not get arrogant and to not get too cocky, which I will never be able to do. And at the same time, I need to use it to motivate me, and I need to use it to remind me of why I'm doing the work that I do.
And a question down here.
Yeah, I don't know if it worked. Just had a question for Alice about restorative justice. I'm shocked that it isn't more widespread in our justice system, but I wondered whether the example in Birmingham, where I believe is that right in the UK that it started, and that it was very successful back in 2005. I understand, when I was looking into it originally to try and do a film about it. And what happened to the brilliant work that was going on there? Do you know of that and the hub there?
Jacob knows a lot more about restorative justice than I do. I know a lot about prisons. And I know a lot about how, as was beautifully shown in the play, a lot about how prison just very often doesn't work. Sometimes it does work. Sometimes when you're kind of in free fall and your whole life is absolute chaos, you kind of need somebody to kind of stop you so that you can just take a breath and decide what to do next and change things. But very often it doesn't work, and very often you're released on, well, maybe not on New Year's Eve, but like on a night when there's loads of bank holidays stretching ahead of you and no support, and you've got a drug addiction and nowhere to live and, all of the rest of it. So I can't talk much about restorative justice history.
No, I think it's a good example. I don't know the exact details of what happened to that specific project, but it's a good example of like what happens with government reshuffles and the cabinet changes and people coming in with different priorities and this kind of inconsistent kind of approach to try and reform the justice system that works for victims and for the public, and why we kind of want to have this common ground test so that no matter what party comes in, no matter how many government reshuffles there are, no matter how many prime ministers there are, and I hope we're not going to continue in how it has been, but
Jacob Dunne backs Keir Starmer.
No, I'm Alastair. I'm going to be running.
I'd back you.
No, MP first. Yeah. But yeah, we want to try and avoid that, because good things happen, and someone has a bright idea, and some people have bad ideas, and it's just kind of like nothing really happens long term. There's no long term strategy, and what we want to be able to do is position ourselves